Hi, welcome to my first lecture on the Queen's Indian defense. The Queen's Indian defense starts off by d4, and then black plays knight f6, preventing white from playing e4. It also signals the hyper-modern strategy where black wants to first control the center with pieces and then with pawns. White's strategy is sort of in the classical line, which says I'm going to control the center with pawns, or at least by having a pawn in the center. White continues c4, controlling the center, especially the square d5. Black plays e6, helping to control the d5 square and releasing or freeing the bishop on f8. And then in the past, I've already covered the Nimzo Indian, where white plays knight c3, black plays bishop b4, and then pinning the knight to the king. To avoid this, white is going to play knight f3, and then the characteristic move of b6 for the Queen's Indian defense. This is known as the essential position of the Queen's Indian defense. Black now intends to fianchetto his bishop by placing it on b6, where we'll look at this line here. So there's a variations of moves, and I'm going to cover in the next series of lectures. White can play g3, which is known as the classical line, can play a3, which is known as a Petrosian variation. Hopefully I said that right. And then knight to c3, which looks very much like the Nimzo Indian. I can't really find a name to this line, though I have found references. Some call it the Russian variation, so that's what I'm going to call it, just so we can have some names for things. So in this lecture, I've sort of covered the basics, and I want to go over the Petrosian variation, which starts off by a3. So why did white play a3? Well, white wants to play knight to c3, but it doesn't want to get the pin. Doesn't want to get the pin when black plays the bishop to b4. So it stops that by playing a3. Black will play bishop to b7. Now, if you don't know, when I cover the classical lines, there are a lot of people who are now starting to play the bishop to a6, attacking the c4 pawn, but I'll cover that when I cover the classical line. So that is another option to play there. But the sort of classical continuation in this variation is playing bishop to b7, putting the bishop on the long diagonal. And now white will play knight to c3, the reason it played a3. Now black is going to play d5, striking at the center. One of the goals of the Queen's Indian defense is to try to control e4. And this helps control e4, even though you say, well, just blocked in the bishop here on b7. But we'll see these pawns will be exchanged off. So white will take the pawn, and then black will take back with a knight. And if you looked at it before, if we back up, this pawn here was helping to control this square. Was really, it had control of that square. And also white had control of this square. So by exchanging pawns, white sort of regained some control over the e4 square. And now white will play e3. This is the move I'm going to cover, but white also has the choice of also playing queen to c2, which is another variation. I suggest going to my website and downloading the file, and you can play through some of the alternative lines. So that's another option for white, but I'm not going to cover that. I'm just going to cover e3. So with white playing e3, obviously it blocks in this bishop here, the bishop on c1, but it does free the bishop on f1. And now black will play bishop to e7, preparing the castle. Really can't find another good square for the bishops except for maybe here. You know, obviously black's not going to put its bishop here or here, so there aren't too many good squares for that bishop on f8. And now white will play bishop to b5. Whoops. Bishop to b5, checking the king. The only real good move to do is for black is to play c6, forcing white to move the bishop again, though it does block the bishop, or putting the pawn in front of the bishop. White will play the bishop back to d3, which is a popular place for white to put the bishop in the queen pawn openings, because it sort of looks at this pawn on the king side. We know that black's in castle king side, and we'll have a possible attack on that pawn. Black will castle. And now white will play queen to c2. Obviously now this pawn is attacked twice, only defended once. And the best move for black is to play h6. So what are the plans for both sides? Well, you know, from here, where do you go? I've been trying to do this in past lectures, but a lot of times I run out of time. Well, for white, you know, it has to get this this bishop out somehow. So it's, well, first we should say, obviously white is going to castle king side. It needs to get this bishop out. And the best way to do that is by playing e4. And then it can continue attacking the king side, because both bishops will be eyeing the pieces. The bishops are sort of pointed to the king side. Black is going to play c5. Obviously wants to get this pawn out in front, you know, away from the so the bishop can have more active play along that diagonal, and also this will help attack the center. This knight here will probably has a couple different options, but one option is to play it to here and then back over to here, help protecting the king side. And then this bishop right here, probably an active diagonal is this diagonal right here, where it can also look at the king side. So that's it for the Petrosian variation. I will continue some other variations in the next lecture.